This is the Authority Partners podcast.
The pessimist complains about the wind. The optimist expects it to change, and the leader adjusts the sail. This is a quote on leadership by John Maxwell because today's Authority Partners podcast is about leadership in hybrid times. Today, my guest in the studio is one glorious woman. Larissa Halilovic is an international team development expert, 2 times TEDx speaker, and a leader with over 20 years of professional experience in leadership, management, training, coaching, and mentoring. She has designed, piloted, and introduced mentorship program and professional networks for women in IT, media, politics, business, creative industries, and civil society. She has led international organizations and global pilot programs in digital industries in 6 countries of the Western Balkans, UK, and New Zealand. Larissa works as a senior leadership consultant for the Authority Partners. Hello, Larissa. It's absolute joy for me to have you in the studio.
Hello, Asya. Thank you so much for this wonderful introduction, and thank you for the invitation.
You're most welcome. It's really good to have you here, and I hope you're doing well these days.
I'm doing very well. The sun
Excellent.
is shining and ready for action.
Yeah, it's a springtime and it's always good start for everything. Larissa, today as I said, we're going to talk about the leadership, especially in hybrid times. But I would like to start from the very beginning. A common question that has been much debated is whether leaders are born or made. How do you look at this? What does your experience tell you?
Well, it's an interesting one, and it's a really tough question to start with, because in my experience, you may have, let's say, the potential for leadership as part of your character. And definitely there are some individuals who are born with this sort of leadership potential. Maybe they are more likely to be able to step out and lead the crowd naturally. However, when it comes to professional leadership, I truly believe, and my experience shows, that you can develop the right skills and competencies which can help you actually become a better leader or become a leader in general.
Well, that's a really good point. And we all know that an effective leader leads by example. So what are the characteristics of successful leaders today?
Well, again, it really depends on your personal style, because I think the real leaders of today need to be truly authentic. And I think the times of faking it until you make it are way gone. So I believe that authenticity is something that true leaders of today need to have as part of their leadership style. Now, you will know that there are lots of different theories on characteristics of good leaders. And Goldman has a whole lot of sessions and videos and books describing different leadership styles. But in my experience, especially in the IT industry, leaders have to have a vision. And this vision needs to be something that drives and motivates others forward. And I think Authority Partners have a really great example there, because Errol, as the owner of the company and the company officer, one of the two, together with Maya, is a true example of visionary leader who's able, to see way ahead, something in the future, and bring others along. But it's not enough to have the vision. In my professional experience, it's really, really important to have a balance of technical skills and experience, and also behavioral skills and experiences. Because over the years of having worked in different industries, I have basically gathered all the evidence to prove the point that you can only get so far with technical skills. But in addition to those, you really need to have emotional intelligence and a whole array of soft skills that go with it. Because in order to work with people, you need to know how to understand people, how to motivate people, how to handle people, etc. And of course, in addition to this, you need to be able to figure out accountabilities, you need to be able to demonstrate by example, you need to be an effective communicator. It is quite a complex set of skills, and as I said in the beginning,
multidimensional approach to leadership, right?
Totally. But still, at the end of the day, you've got to have your own way. Copying someone else, copy paste doesn't exist, in my opinion, in leadership.
That's so true. I guess like in every business, you need to be unique and to be yourself. Talking about emotional intelligence, that brings me back to Authority Partners previous podcast. It was like on emotional intelligence for business analysts, from business analyst perspective by Lydia Mansour, who is a business analyst at Authority Partners. So this really fits greatly into our podcast talks. And I would go just a little bit back when you talk about the importance of emotional intelligence or EQ. What is it like when you put it in a simple terms?
Well, I listened to the podcast of Lydia. I'd like to shout out to Lydia. Thank you so much for championing this important subject across the board, not only within Authority Partners, but beyond. Because really, when it comes to management and leadership and life in general, if you work with people, and we all work with people directly or indirectly, whether we like it or not, emotional intelligence is something that really paves the way and that makes a difference to how well you actually are able to work with yourself and with other people. And to put it simply, emotional intelligence, basically, it's a bit of a matrix. It's about yourself and how you deal with others. And
like how you co-create with people.
Basically, but it's got three levels. So first level is understanding yourself. Next one is handling or managing yourself. And the third one is motivating yourself. And the same goes for your relationships with others. So it's understanding others, or basically picking up the signals from them, recognizing their emotions, their feedback, even before they say anything. Also, the second level is knowing how to manage your relationship with others, your behavior towards others, and the way you interact with others. And then the third level, just like the individual level, it's also about being able to motivate others. And this is something that doesn't get talked about enough, in my view, because very often, when people say what's emotional intelligence, people say, oh, it's empathy. Well, in my research and in my experience, it's not only about empathy and understanding emotions and, being in tune and stopping yourself from impulsive reaction. The very, very important part of this is actually being able to motivate yourself when you're down, and also being able to motivate others, especially when you put it in the context of this hybrid work and remote work. This is something that really, really makes a difference.
That's true. And I think like lots of times people kind of mix empathy with sympathy.
Absolutely. And sometimes, when we say sympathy, especially in the Balkans, it has different levels of meaning, but empathy is basically being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and being able to understand what they're going through without necessarily taking over their emotions or without feeling sorry for them. And this is really, really important. You can feel with someone, you can understand someone, you can acknowledge what they're going through, but the point is not to feel sorry for them or to tell them what they should and shouldn't do. So empathy really does require quite a bit of practice, but it can be learned.
And what would you kind of pinpoint when it comes to importance of having EQ when you lead people?
Well, as I mentioned, all of those things are really important because in my experience, we're all working under a lot of pressure. And there is a stress coming at us left, right, and center. But if you use your emotional intelligence, you are able to first figure out, how you're feeling in a certain moment, because sometimes different things activate different emotions in ourselves. And in professional context, it's not really acceptable, to blow up even when you're not feeling 100%. Now, I know maybe things would be easier for us all if that were the case, but as you know, it's simply not the way to go. I'm not saying we should be pretending that everything is peaches and cream, but also I don't think we should be going around yelling at people, being rude, etc. And also, we really need to figure out how what we say and do impacts other people. And sometimes that really means taking a moment to think about the other person before you push send on that email, especially if you're writing an email under a whole lot of emotion in affect. Very often I say to people when they get really, really annoyed and when they sit down and write that email full of charge, I tell them to park it and not to send it, and even sometimes to send it to themselves and wait until tomorrow, because sometimes a lot of let's say tension can be transmitted through emails without us even being aware of how that's interpreted on the other side. So one element of emotional intelligence is really, thinking about how the other person perceives and how they feel and how they act upon what I have said or done in my relationship with them.
Yeah, it's like to anticipate how one will decode your email or your narrative in the email. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and also this is relevant to talking as well, because sometimes we're so wrapped up in our thoughts and what I want to say to you that I'm not even following. First, whether you're following. Second, are you actually engaged in what I'm saying? And from the leadership point of view, again, if you want to be able to engage other people, to really go for it and to do the work they are there to do with a lot of passion, you need to be able to sort of sense how they're feeling about those things. Now, one person cannot do that, especially in large companies such as Authority Partners, but the whole team needs to pay attention to these sorts of things.
One word is coming to my mind, and this is like, it's a balance.
Yeah, balance is a tricky word, as you know, people talk about.
But it's hard to define the balance. There is no true definition to balance.
Yeah. And the moment you mention work-life balance, that creates a whole lot of other debates on whether it's life balance and whether there should be work-life balance. But going back to the balance in yourself, it's more about really keeping there in the moment and really keeping your peace while being true to yourself. And this is really hard, because there are so many activators and triggers around us. But it is important at the end of the day that we're able, to recognize our emotions and emotions of others, to also manage our own reactions and behaviors and how we correlate with others. And as I said before, to motivate ourselves, because we all have days when we're down and when we need to pick ourselves up, and sometimes we can do it ourselves. But leaders are really expected to be able to, in addition to motivate themselves, to actually be able to motivate others. So it's a complex task. It's not an easy one, but it's also really rewarding when you can do it.
But in a way, I guess I'm answering now your question at the beginning. Actually, my question to you, I guess you need to be born just a little bit a leader.
Maybe. I'll give you that far.
Larissa, we know that every culture is based on values. In AP, we often use the term that culture eats strategy for breakfast. AP founders, as you mentioned, Maya and Daryl Karabek, once talked about the importance of building and nurturing such company culture that will result in the natural flow of all activities without the need for any written policy and procedure. This is also an element you often talk about in your talks. How are values relevant in professional life?
Well, I'm really glad you asked this one because values, in my experience, and for all the listeners around the world who have heard my TEDx talks, will know that I strongly advocate for being aware of your own values and also making sure that you know, understand, and walk the values or walk the talk behind the values of your company. And as you mentioned, Maya and Errol Karabag, one of the reasons I decided to actually work with them and their team is because my values and their values were compatible. And this is something that when I work with students around the world, when I work with individuals in executive coaching, one of the first sessions I always focus on is understanding yourself in terms of your own values. What is it that's really, really important to you? What is it that's not negotiable? And what is it that makes you feel aligned with yourself? Because if you get those things right, everything you do can lead to, let's say, decisions which are made in tune with yourself. However, if we are working against our values, that's something that can cause a lot of tension. It can cause a lot of disappointment. It can cause anger, and in some cases
Frustration, right?
absolutely, and even anxiety, and it can get really complicated. And this is why I strongly believe, and this is something I teach across the board and around the world, that company leaders, once they identify their own values and values of their companies, they really need to demonstrate those through everything they do. And the people who are aspiring to become leaders, they really need to take time to understand themselves and their own values and see how those values match company's values. And then in everything we do, all the decisions we make, if we make them in line with those values, then we will not be off course. So I often say, working in alignment with your values is like working in line with your compass, which you have in your pocket, but if you don't use it, you're going to get lost.
That's a really good one. Can I quote you on this?
Sure, please go ahead.
Well, there are many inspirational speakers nowadays that speak about the importance of doing what you love as a way to achieve great professional results. Career progression is something that is hard to crack, especially now when there are so many options and paths. What, in your experience, is essential to achieve progress towards leadership?
Well, again, you mentioned something that's a source of a lot of debate. Doing what you love is a beautiful construct, which I strongly believe in. But as you know, it's hard to get there, especially for people who may not have so much choice to start with. But in my experience, understanding what it is that you are good at, what it is that you enjoy, and what it is that you can develop in further is what makes all the difference. So in my experience, if I had to say, identify one critical factor to progress and development, is actually focusing on developing yourself. And in the IT industry, you've got to be really up to date. As you know, things are changing on daily basis. You need to be up to date with the newest developments in technology, even in management style, in people's preferences. So I would say if you want to progress in a leadership career, it's important to constantly learn and learn and learn. And sometimes the best way to learn is from mistakes, and even better if you can learn through other people's mistakes. And this is why often in relation to career progression, I advocate mentorship as one of the most progressive tools for development, because I strongly, strongly believe that, mentorship is a way of helping you learn and develop your skills, your experience, your confidence, but also learn from other people's mistakes and not necessarily making the same one yourself.
Well, I'm not surprised you mentioned mentorship. You have been very active in introducing mentorship in different industries in many countries. What kind of mentorship are you talking about, and why is it so important? Let's maybe deep dive into this subject.
Sure, sure. This is like when you say fly, and people think of all the different things. One will think of an insect, the next person will think of flying on an airplane, the third person will think of flying, being thrown over the edge and flying with free flight. Mentorship really means different things to different people. And in the Balkans, when you say mentorship, very often people think of the academic mentorship. In the US, mentorship, which I'm advocating, and also in the UK, where I learned a lot about mentorship myself, is something completely different. So basically, the mentorship I am trying to motivate people to get into is one-to-one developmental mentorship. So it's not instrumental. It's not about necessarily learning a single skill. So it's not like how to, let's say, draw a beautiful bird and you teach me step by step how to draw a beautiful bird. This is more about asking me the questions, showing me the options of where I can get the resources to, if I want to draw a beautiful bird, and I find my own way of drawing the beautiful bird. So basically, the mentorship I'm talking about is one-to-one relationship between a more experienced and less experienced individual, where the whole point is support. And the whole point is that I'm dedicated to you making the progress that you want to, and I am, as a mentor, skilled to ask you really powerful questions and to reflect on your questions so that you're able to actually make your decisions, you're able to build your confidence, and you are able to go through tasks and life and work with the support that all of us need. Now, what's really interesting is that, mentorship has been around the business world, around the world, for over 20 years. And, there are books about it, there is a whole lot of research, but unfortunately, in some parts of the world, it's only being discovered. And also what's really interesting when it comes to mentorship is that for men, it is part of a standard practice. It looks like there was somewhere a boys' club that said, you've got to get a mentor. But for women around the world, this is something relatively new. And this is why it's hugely important to actually, and this is why we introduced Girls in IT in Bosnia and Herzegovina, for example, where one of the authority partner centers is located. We introduced mentorship for girls in the IT industry for the first time. I think it was a couple of years ago.
Yes, it was.
And the whole reason is we need to be able to support one another. We need to be able to support both men and women and girls to feel that they have the confidence to make the decisions, to join the workforce, to make progress in the industries, and also to have positive examples. In authority partners, there are so many women who are in leadership positions, who are in managerial roles, and they're excellent role models. We need to bring them in the forefront, and we need to make sure to pair them up with less experienced individuals so that they show the kind of leadership that you can have, and that they show the support and readiness that mentors are really there to do. And it's a two-way process. With mentorship, you actually, both individuals gain. So you feel as a mentee, you develop a lot of new knowledge, skills, and confidence, but also as a mentor, you learn a lot, you get a different perspective, you feel useful, your views sometimes change and broaden. So it's a beautiful, beautiful two-way relationship that's useful for everyone involved. So I would strongly encourage all of the listeners who haven't tried it, to try it, because it doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be strictly formal. Yes, there are formal mentorship programs, but sometimes it means literally going up to a person or approaching an individual or calling or sending an email and saying, I really admire what you do. I'm impressed by your example and what you are active in. I would be really grateful if you can dedicate 1 hour a month or 1 hour however often you think is necessary. And most people, even the busiest ones, they will find the time to help someone else.
And it doesn't have to be from the same line of work. It can be from different aspects of life.
Absolutely.
We can just, support young people to, like, if we have like long-standing career in some specific area, we can support different groups of young people to learn, and as you said, to hear new fresh ideas. That's really benefiting to people working for so many years and have their careers, but have to have a different perspective, a different angle to the different topics that they're dealing with daily.
Sure, and actually sometimes cross-industry mentorship is beneficial, especially to get that different perspective. Sometimes to get the devil's advocate. We often, when I work with creative industries, we often try and pair up people from the creative industry with someone from the business, because sometimes you need to hear that other point of view that's so different from yours, but that's needed. And another thing I just need to emphasize is that age sometimes is a tricky bit, because everyone thinks that a mentor has to be older than the mentee. But nowadays, worldwide, there is reverse mentoring often happening. And this means, for example, a CEO of a company, and I'm going to be totally stereotypical here, but if you have a CEO who is of certain age, which I know is not the case everywhere, but sometimes they will get reverse mentoring from new, young entrants to the career to actually make sure that they're up to date with technology, with new developments, with new progressive ideas. And again, this works, it works both ways. Both individuals in this relationship then benefit.
Absolutely, and that reminds me of a story that I've heard recently from a friend of mine, that his boy actually lectured his colleagues on new social media. So he basically gave like a tutorial on how to use TikTok.
Exactly. We had something similar during the team planning workshop a couple of months ago. I'm leading one rather large and dispersed team, and we came together for the first time, and one of our colleagues had his child with him. And it was really interesting. One of the tasks was to create, an engaging social media story about some of the successes of our work. And similarly to your example, this young boy, I think he's at the age of 12, he was literally mentoring, tutoring, and supporting the team of 5 people in how to produce something that's up to date and engaging to the audience.
I think we're talking about the same boy. I guess he's regionally famous for his mentorship skills. Do you have any message for our listeners, something that they will carry like after listening to this podcast?
Sure. I mean, if you're into leadership, please first look after yourself, because leadership is definitely a marathon, not a sprint. And the second thing is, please be open to learning, and it's okay to make mistakes and learn along the way. That's the best way to actually learn and move forward. And the third bit is get a mentor. And if you're really good, get a coach and a mentor, because that way you will have the support you need to make that progress. And be kind to yourself and to others. That, in my experience, is what makes all the difference in how you lead when you do. Thank you so much, Asya.
Thank you so much for being with us today, and we shared with the audience your outlook on leadership and mentorship in hybrid times. Thank you very much, Larissa.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Authority Partners podcast. Stay tuned for the next episode.